out to Socrates. Socrates still trying to get the opening. Oh, Socrates! Whoa!
And there it is. The crazy gang have beaten the Culture Club.
Maggie Thatcher, can you hear me? Maggie Thatcher, your boys took the hell of a beating. Your boys took the hell of a beating.
1979-80 revisited. A slight deviation for what we're on. We are subsection module 1.09 paragraph 1. In your continue learnings, do open your folders at the relevant pages. Brian Moore meets Kevin Keegan, Dave. This was broadcast on, I've got my calendar right, I think it was the 16th of November, Friday night, just before the weekend's football. All week long, the rumbling story of FC Cologne's pursuit of Tony Woodcock at Nottingham Forest. Hennes Weisweiler has said, Woodcock is the man I need to be able to build my team around. You know, the big money is being kind of like thrown at across a probably very smooth and polished table at the Mungersdorfer. Everything's very attractive, and if there's any doubts, when you've got Brian Clough, who's quite convinced that he can talk Tony Woodcock around into staying. Then on the Friday night, you've got Brian Moore meets Kevin Keegan. Brian Moore goes over to Hamburg and spends 3 weeks with Kevin Keegan in the summer of 1979. Probably, to be fair, while that 11-week industrial action's going on at ITV. Got to find something to do. What can we do? What can we do with Brian Moore? Tell you what, let's send him to Hamburg with a production crew for 3 weeks at great expense. It does make for a fascinating 45 minutes or so of with the adverts hacked out. I'm quite sad that this you'll find this on Daily Motion rather than YouTube. It's probably on YouTube somewhere, but when you come to Google, Brian Moore meets Kevin Keegan, it pops up on Daily Motion. Yeah, all the aged adverts are cut out, so there's no Rigsby doing Chinzano adverts with Lorraine Chase and all that type of stuff. We've sadly missed Imperial Leather and all the type of things that we would expect from 1979 adverts. The only thing that's missing from this. But we do get the 45 minutes of the programme. It's fascinating. You remember watching this at the time, Dave, and the reverberations it prompted.
This is magnificent detective work on your part to find this and book it into the series. It was. I do remember when it came on. I mean, it was very rare to have a documentary about a footballer, because they were generally deemed far too trivial for that kind of treatment. But Kevin, I mean, we've talked about Kevin Keegan in all kinds of series all over the place, haven't we? He's somebody who transcended everything. Kind of in a way that George Best did, but equally without the chaos of George Best, obviously. And I mean, I always kind of think of Kevin Keegan as the bridge between George Best and David Beckham. I mean, Keegan learned all the things not to do from George Best, then exploited himself to the nth degree. And I'm not saying that as a negative at all, because I mean, I think he did that on the pitch as well. I mean, you can't say that Kevin Keegan was a talent in the way of a George Best. But what Kevin Keegan did was he got every ounce out of himself on the pitch and off the pitch in every regard. And I think, when David Beckham came along another sort of 20 years later, whatever it was, 15 years later, Keegan was very much a blueprint for what David Beckham was. But as a sign of the times, I mean, it's just perfect in every sense. It's football moving into a different era. It's somebody from this country being successful abroad, which again was a complete novelty in those days. That never really happened at all. We never travelled abroad anywhere in any field and were successful. So, for it to be Kevin Keegan as well, his lifestyle is just an eye opener in a day where we're only sort of. I think most footballers at that point. I mean, Laurie Cunningham, who moved in the summer of '79, for instance, from the Albion, he was getting £100 a week at the Albion at that point. Now, okay, that's because the Albion were tight, but equally, most First Division footballers weren't getting a huge amount more than that. And here's Kevin Keegan talking about being in a £200,000 house that he's already paid for. I mean, this was mind blowing, and people were talking about this program for weeks afterwards. It was just. Nobody could quite come to terms with any of it. It was it was groundbreaking in every possible way. So the strike did everybody a bit of good in that sense.
I mean, it is stunning as a kind of like a window on Keegan's mind as much as anything else, which races at 100 miles per hour, a million miles per hour. It's kind of like absolute chaos. We're used to seeing kind of like Maradona comes along and the bedlam that surrounded Maradona, and this is kind of like again another step in that direction. It's fascinating seeing him kind of like sat there on the very 1970s sofa in his luxurious kind of like bungalow that he's bought for £200,000 cash. Chatting about his wife, who's kind of like he gives £100 to go and spend on clothes, and she buys 2 pullovers and a skirt from the market and comes back with £92 in change, because that is Mrs. Keegan down to a T.
Good on her.
Good on her. Absolutely good on her. The one person there keeping him anchored to the ground. Yeah, she's got her work cut out, Dave. There's a lot going on. For Kevin Keegan in the summer of 1979, but also in terms of the backdrop in which this program is set against. There's some absolute magic involved in this program.
It is one of those you have got to go out and seek it out and watch it. I mean, it is fascinating. I mean, I just think Kevin Keegan has been completely misrepresented in so many ways, or elements of Kevin Keegan that are fascinating and just ignored in the, amid the Geordie Messiah and the Southampton. He's just the most fascinating person, I think. I mean, he's clearly running away from his background in the sense that he saw his dad working down the mine, working class, eventually was too ill to work from silicosis and all that kind of stuff. And his mum having to go out to work, and she would obviously be in her late 50s or whatever to support the family. And he's, understandably, that's not going to happen to me. I'm going to make sure that, and you can entirely understand that. And then there's a glorious moment where he's in a chartered plane to Nice to the Patrick factory, and his agent says, "You've been asked to turn up at an event for Margaret Thatcher." And he said, "Well, if it was Jim Callaghan, I might, but but Thatcher, my dad would kill me." but at the same time, I mean, he is. Well, there's a lot of the way he talks. He's very much the Shankly socialist. He's also a prototype Thatcherite as well. I mean, it is a really strange and interesting mix of, he's going to make sure he screws every penny out of everything that he can. Fair play to him for that. He moans like buggery about the income tax regime in Great Britain,
but then argues that it wasn't his reason for going. And this is great. There's one point where he turns around and he says, "It's not that I don't trust people, but I just don't trust people." It's this two magnificent atoms clashing against one another, all going off in his head, which is just amazing to kind of like in terms of human nature. It's a fascinating program to watch.
It is. I mean, he's caught in that sort of crossfire between the two. If we're going to talk about politics, I mean, in post-war, it was the consensus, wasn't it? It was the growth of the welfare state, and by and large, we looked after one another to a lesser or greater extent. But that was the theory. It was that post-war consensus, and then Thatcherism was about to turn up and dominate the next 50 years. God help us. And he's caught right in the crossfire of the two. He's got a foot in both camps. You can tell that he doesn't like the fact that he kind of knows that he's talking in Thatcherite terms. Not that he would put it in those terms necessarily, but he knows that he's out there making as much money as he can, and he doesn't want to pay any tax, and he knows that the tax is going to look after people like his dad who did get silicosis in the health service. But at the same time, he thinks, well, if I get the money, I can look after him myself. He knows that he's got a short career at the top. So, I mean, he's everywhere. He's signing autographs in front of forklift trucks. He's doing 4-hour autograph signing sessions because he gets, 500 quid for it or whatever it is. Everything. And I'm not saying this because I genuinely like Kevin Keegan. I think he's a sound bloke. But everything seems to have a price tag attached as well. to everything that he does has got and you know, again, I can understand that if you are being required to do this, that, and the other, why not make the money out of it? But I think it was the first time anybody had ever been quite so naked, certainly in football terms, about, you know, right, if I'm going to do that, I want this much. If I'm going to do that, I want that much. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to have a bit more. And that was just really, I think people were uncomfortable with it and they were amazed by it because they didn't know what to do with it at the time. I think we really had no clue what to do with it.
No, he's not followed a blueprint for anyone else in certainly not British football at this point in time, which you know means that there's a nation absolutely confounded by it. Yeah, there's some amazing stuff in there. You know, within the very first few minutes, he's singing along to Lee Marvin. I was born under London Star. I didn't realise Lee Marvin was Scottish, Dave, because
it does sound like Lee Marvin meets Bill Shankly.
He does start to go a bit Bill Shankly. And it's an incredible opening scene to do. We also then get to see the dogs that tripped him over on the eve of the new season, that left him as a doubt for the opening weekend of the Bundesliga season, which I thought was brilliant touch. You know, it's
with dogs, and they're not small dogs, are they?
They're not small dogs, no. Old English sheepdogs. Yeah, he's missed a marketability avenue there with Dulux, without a shadow of a doubt. Then you've got Harry, his agent, who's got just the most wonderful facial hair. Looks like he's sorting Keegan's contracts out of a morning before hopping in the Spitfire to fly back to Blighty for eggs and bacon, and Biggin Hill and all that type of stuff. Harry looks a character.
For a fellow who says, it's not that I don't trust people, it's I don't trust people. Harry's not the kind of guy that you would necessarily want to trust. I mean, he has got the air of you know, the spiv about him a little bit, I think. but I mean, obviously, it's a very successful partnership, and I mean, you know, what's he showing him there? He's showing him some Kevin Keegan pajamas, which, you know, has become standard kind of fare these days. You know, the tie into everything, isn't it? But I mean, this was new, radical stuff.
It totally was. I mean, it's amazing. Look, I mean, Keegan's kind of like open in that, you know, with sponsorships, etc. You know, he talks of his contract, his playing contract alone. You know, clearly HSV have gone to him when he's at Liverpool and said, "How much do you earn a year?" And he's turned around and said, £22,000 a year, which he's openly candid about. His last contract with Liverpool was worth £22,000 a year. And Hamburg say, "I tell you what, we'll give you that and an extra £100,000 on top." And then by the time kind of like contracts are kind of like thrown in with various kind of like, you know, Hamburg, you know, industries and all sorts, he's like, well, it's like £400,000. And then that's before he even gets to kind of like his own personal sponsorships that Harry's sorting him out. And there's a great bit where Harry's saying we have to go to Barcelona, and Kevin doesn't want to go to Barcelona. And he's got his shades on the private jet when he's saying, and this is where he's saying kind of like, yeah, I'd do it for Jim Callahan, but not for Thatcher. And it's just such a great backdrop. It's like Keegan is, you know, it's like Roger Moore's become a footballer.
I mean, it is film star stuff, isn't it? It really is. I mean, I'm sure Kenny Dalglish was delighted to hear about Keegan getting £22,000 a year at Liverpool, so everybody knows how much Kenny Dalglish was earning roughly at Anfield. But it's just such a glamorous lifestyle, and yet it isn't at the same time. I mean, he's very down to earth. You know, there's scenes of him buying sausages in a German shopping mall kind of thing, and then complaining that he didn't like the taste of them anyway. I don't know why we've brought
that is one of the absolute golden nuggets of he's talking what seems to us fluent German. You know, no one pulls him up on it.
No?
No, so you know it seems plausible. It's absolutely plausible German that he's talking. And yeah, he buys this cooked meat. You know, nods his approval for it at the counter, walks a couple of aisles away. I don't like this stuff that we've bought. And Mrs. Keegan's, I can still taste that. Still got taste in my mouth. And then she's rumbling, women can talk you into absolutely anything. It's it is absolutely spectacular.
It is. It's,
You know,
every scene is gold, isn't it? Really.
it really is go. And at this point around the supermarket as well, he's walking around with his daughter in a sling. Renaissance man as well.
Absolutely.
He's a modern man before his. In so many respects, we talk about the commercialism and all that type of stuff being ahead of the game, and there he is being kind of like, you know, hands on dad, got the sling on, his daughter's there, happy as anything, happy as Harry, should we say? And just and then he turns around towards the end of it and said, "Yeah, at the end of the season, we'll be leaving Hamburg." It's kind of like he's got this idyllic lifestyle going on in Hamburg, and yeah, I'll chuck it all in and do something else. Barcelona have been talking, and the NASL have been knocking and offering 2-3 times what I'm earning here in Hamburg, and it's like it absolutely stuns it. And then he talks about Saudi Arabia, and you know, turn around and says, "What would it take for us to get you to Saudi Arabia?" Well, you know, come back and talk to me at Christmas. It'd cost you £1 million for me to take my wife there. And then they ring him back and say, "Yeah, we can probably do that."
I don't know who he was going to be playing against in Saudi Arabia at that time. But yeah, I mean, he's the, you know, it's the time he's winning the Ballon d'Or, and he's the most wanted player in the world, I suppose, at that stage, really. But I mean, you know, some of the stuff at the start is really interesting. You kind of, I mean, you know, when Gunter Netzer turns up as his manager, I thought, oh, Christ, yeah, he went there for Gunter Netzer, didn't he? You know, you kind of forget about that. And then the stuff he's talking about in the first couple of months when he was there, when his teammates wouldn't talk to him, and he had to sort of literally fight his way into back into the limelight. I mean, that sort of steel and determination that he's got is, I mean, that's obviously what you need to get to the absolute top. But my God, he's got that in spades, hasn't he? I mean, there's nothing going to stop Kevin Keegan doing what Kevin Keegan wants to do. As soon as he set his mind to it, that's it. It's happening.
Yeah, totally and utterly. You know, he's basically ostracised as he gets to Hamburg. He talks about the coldness of his teammates, and you know, he tries to speak to them in German, and they just kind of like, you know, give him the cold shoulder and all of this. You know, he talks of the moment that he gives a right left to a nemesis on the pitch, wins himself an 8-week ban that has, you know, shades of Bremner and the 74 Charity Shield revisited, shall we say. You know, he's on about leaving Hamburg at the end of the first year. They bring in Netzer, who's kind of like a facilitator, and then everything takes off. But I mean, within this, that first testing year for him at Hamburg, you know, he's got kind of like, he speaks of kind of like people basically wanting him to fail, you know, back home, and wanting to come back with his tail between his legs and all that type of stuff. So that kind of like throws extra into that, you know, for him to say, have the steeliness to say, no, I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to prove you all wrong. For those both, you know, what he's surrounded by in Hamburg and what he's potentially having to go back to in England, you know, by saying, yeah, it didn't work out, and you know, I've come back.
I mean, but at that point, how many British players rather, had worked overseas? John Charles. That's about it, really, isn't it? I mean, you know, there's no, you know, Dennis Law, Jimmy Greaves, you know, whoever. They all sort of came back pretty damn quick. But he's not going to be made to look a fool. He's not going to fail. He's going to succeed. He's going to succeed on his own terms, and he's the absolute object lesson, I think, in getting the most out of everything that you've got in life, whatever talent you've got, whatever, you know, position you're in. He screws it into the ground. He takes absolutely everything from it. You know, I mean, learning the language, it's such a laudable thing. I mean, particularly at that time, nobody in this country was bothering about learning the language and going abroad. I mean, yeah, you did your French O level, and that was it. That was, unless you went to university, that was the end of your language studies. Thanks very much. That was it. You might occasionally people might borrow a couple of linguaphone records at the library if they were going on holiday, but that was it. You know, I mean, everything about him is steely focused. And then, you know, when he does get this 8-week suspension, and suddenly they start losing games without him, everybody's, oh, he's all right after all. We'll get him back in the team. When can you start playing for us again? And then he becomes the absolute focal point of it all. And wins the Ballon d'Or. They win the Bundesliga. They get to the European Cup final. It's all gravy after that, really, I suppose. But it would have been dead easy just to say, "Oh, bugger this, I'll come back," because all kinds of clubs would have wanted him. Perhaps Liverpool would have wanted him. Maybe they wouldn't with Dalglish there by then. But he could have gone to Manchester United. He could have gone to Arsenal. He could have had his pick, couldn't he? If he'd wanted to come back home at that point. But no, I'm not going to fail. I'm going to show everybody. That's the whole Kevin Keegan thing. I'm going to show everybody. And he plays some fantastic football while he's there as well. He comes back to play for England, and he's in fantastic form for England. And again, people are saying, "Oh well, he shouldn't be playing." Even Bob Paisley, he's kind of saying, "Well, if he's gone abroad, perhaps he shouldn't be in the England team or whatever." He comes back, plays against Italy, scores a fantastic glancing header as England win under Ron Greenwood, and then he's back as Kevin Keegan, and everybody's fawning all over him. That's what he does. That's the nature of his career. It's an extraordinary thing, and everything is captured in this, including the most remarkable flared trousers. I mean, he's probably got a couple of dogs hiding under them as well. They're amazing. Those flares.
They are a work of art. They are an absolute work of art. And how we can, and he plays football against his dogs in the garden in these flares.
He does.
That's truly amazing. It truly is amazing. I mean, there's some other great footy. I mean, you say that he talks about kind of like the goal he scored against Scotland, and he thought it was one of his most basic goals ever. And then you come to see the footage of it and think, that's a good goal, that, Kevin. What are you talking about? It's a good goal, that. Great team goal, great individual element to it, great team goal. But you get feeling like in Keegan's mind, all he's seen is the penalty box finish at the end of it, not what builds up to it. So again, it's that juxtaposition of kind of like Keegan's mind working at 1,000,000 miles per hour, and it's what built up to that has kind of gone unconsidered, which is kind of like again another fascinating thing. He talks of Paisley and his comments about he's playing abroad, he shouldn't be considered for England. Yeah, his relationship with Shankly as well. These are fascinating things. He talks about Shankly and Shankly's warning that if you carry on playing at the pace you're playing, you'll burn out by the time the 1982 World Cup comes around. And there's a bit of the kind of prophecy there in that respect, because the 82 World Cup, he's restricted to about 18 minutes or so. There is a bit of Nostradamus of Shankly in there. There's Keegan kind of like knowing where he's probably going, because he says, by 82 I'm out of football and I'll never be back. I always remember him saying that once he'd finished football, that'd be it. He does another 2 years eventually at Newcastle, which we've covered on one of the other modules with Aidan Williams. Do seek that out, and it is just it's just that ticking of the mind. That's absolutely. It just floods through everything about this program.
Yeah, it's the most electrifying pace. Even now, here we are, 45 years further on, and life is much quicker and whatnot to what it was in the 70s. But even now, you look at him in 1979, and he is 1,000,000 miles an hour. Mrs. K at one point says, well, the doctors have told me to try and slow him down. But I said to him, well, what can I do? I can't stop him.
Yeah, she talks a kind of like the house being in pristine condition, and then he comes home and it's an absolute bomb site within 5 minutes, and she doesn't. She's not phased in the slightest. She's just kind of, well, that's just Kevin being Kevin. It's again, his future ambitions. He states at first he states that he'd quite like to be a politician, and within a split second he's upgraded himself to, actually, it would have to be Prime Minister.
Yeah, I don't want to mess around. I just want to get things.
I don't want to mess around. I want to be at the focal point of this, and it's all just kind of like absolutely Keegan. And one of the favourite parts of this is when like say they go to Nice and the Patrick factory, and he's charming the French factory workers, both the women, and then the men fall for him as well. And it's kind of like he goes past the clocking on machine, picks up a card and clocks one of the cards, and you're left thinking there's going to be someone there kind of like being shortchanged in the wage at the end of the week because Kevin's clocked him off kind of like 2 hours into his shift rather than after the full 8-hour day.
Yeah, they've had the push at the end of the week. Where did you go on Tuesday afternoon?
Where did you go? You clocked out at 10 a.m. What?
But I mean, everybody's trying. I mean, there's the scene when they've got the Bundesliga trophy and they're on the balcony in the city hall or whatever it is, and there's somebody in the crowd with a Scunthorpe United scarf.
Yeah. So they've clearly done their due diligence on him and kind of like,
I don't even know how in 1979 you would have got a Scunthorpe United, because they hadn't got an online shop then. Let's face it.
No,
So
you would have literally had to ring up the club or write to the club and say, "This is what I want."
send an
Can you help
international
me out?
money order from Hamburg.
Yeah, very very much like people writing to Brian Moore and Brian Moore telling everyone where they lived. It's got just a simpler time, but so much more charming.
But
There's-
everybody loves him, don't they? I mean,
they do.
he manages to charm absolutely everybody. Nobody's got a, and you can't quite work out, other than jealousy in that sort of first couple of months in Germany, how the players took against him, because everybody else he's God's gift, basically. It is the most fascinating program about, it's a different world, a very different world, sort of on the cusp of becoming the one that we recognise a bit more. But he's 20, 30 years ahead of his time, isn't he?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. Without a shadow of a doubt. But yeah, like I say, it's just a fascinating window on his time at Hamburg, and just kind of like the fault lines of football where you're seeing it. And part of that, you've got Tony Woodcock being able to utilise freedom of contract, as well, which has been introduced. Nottingham Forest clearly lamenting the fact that he's not moving to another English club where they could have made double the amount, £625,000 that Cologne were paying for him at a point in time when Manchester City have just bought Steve Daly for £1.5 million, or just short of. You can kind of get Brian Clough's angst as part of this, but also kind of like there's something brilliant about Clough kind of like getting his a kind of comeuppance in a way, in that he's just been so bullish early in the week and saying that I'm sure I can talk him into staying, and even the brashness of Clough as kind of like as he's helpless within this unfolding situation.
I think, again, Keegan is the one that made it look a possibility for players, and a couple of years down the line, you've got guys like Ray Wilkins and Joe Jordan and whoever going to Italy again when that opens up after the World Cup. It was such a huge leap. I mean, I remember when after the European Cup and stuff, when Liverpool won the European Cup, and he was announced he was going abroad and all that, and everybody, there was like this gasp of, well, why is he going abroad? Because nobody ever succeeded. I mean, even in these modules that we've been doing here, Dave Watson, he's been to Werder Bremen and come back within about 3 weeks. Yeah, so it's still seen as such a difficult thing, but Keegan's made it work. And if Keegan can make it work, why can't Tony Woodcock make it work? And it kind of opens not the floodgates, because it was still very few who went abroad, but it sort of makes it seem like, okay, well, if he can do it, perhaps I could do it as well. And Woodcock was the kind of player you could see playing in Germany. You could see how he would work there, but it just changes and that was Keegan all the way through. He constantly changes everything. He got his name and his face on anything you could think of, from shoes to pajamas to forklift trucks to God knows what else. That was a new world, and obviously David Beckham and whoever followed on in his way later on. But Keegan was the one that kind of invented the modern footballer, I suppose, in that sense.
He absolutely did. He set a new blueprint. Dave Watson clearly went over there, and this was beyond him, and I'm sure his wife has probably played a part in that. And let's head back, and they've headed off to the Dell. Laurie McMenamin's like, yeah, come on, you can come to me, it's fine. But yeah, I mean, this is all within a few of the headlines, from that week as well, are worth looking at in terms of, I don't know, just the kind of demographic of football and what's happening in terms of finances and other sleight of hand almost. Tommy Docherty at an FWA lunch in London. He brands him, and he paints himself as part of this situation as well. So it's not like everyone else apart from me. But he says, he brands managers as hypocrites and cheats, con men. He said we have to be to survive. In our world, the morals are different. So you've in the same week you've got this expose on Keegan. You've got Tommy Docherty being quite frank about the fact that managers have to pull the wool over players' eyes. The directors, the people in the media who are covering the game. There's a lot of subterfuge going on in many respects. So this alteration of the game, it's not just down to player power. There's a lot going on at this point in time, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, you go back as far as the middle 60s, just after the maximum wage, and Shankly, Busby, Nicholson, Catterick, they all formed a sort of cartel saying, right, well, none of us are going to pay players beyond whatever it was, £100 a week or whatever, because otherwise none of us will be able to afford it. And then, they all worked on that. I mean, players have all, that's part of the game, isn't it? It always has been. How little can you spend to get the best possible result? I mean, that's still the way football works in lots of respects. It is that shift in sand now. I mean, we had all those years of where players were under restrictive contracts, where there was the maximum wage, where there was, you couldn't move unless your club wanted you to move, and they could hold you to ransom with a massive transfer fee, and they could stick you in there, and all of that is just breaking down now. And now it's the players who are getting all of the cards in their hand, beginning to get the cards in their hand. You can see what Docherty's saying, and you can see why he's saying it, because he can tell that it's coming to the end. It's those days are numbered. It's going to become a very different landscape fairly shortly. And of course, we're now in a landscape as well where we're bringing players in from overseas. RD, Lesvia, Muir and Tyson, etc., etc. That's starting to make a little bit of an impact as well. Everything is everything that football has kept an iron grip on for 80 years of the Football League or whatever, 90 years of the Football League you're coming to, is now beginning to just break apart. It can't hold anymore in the modern world. And when Kevin Keegan's telling you that he's on £122,000 a year and paying not very much tax, it ain't going to hold together much longer.
It isn't, especially when you've got a Liam Brady approaching the end of his contract at the end of the season as well. And it's a fascinating crossroads in the game. Dave, paragraph 1's just been absolutely outstanding to start this deviation into the world of Brian Moore meets Kevin Keegan. Honestly, get on the find it wherever you can. But I found it on Daily Motion.
There is one last thing we must point out. He goes to the England get together in the hotel. He's got a hired car. He pulls up in the hired car. The number plate on the car is 3 VAR.
Yeah, that's very. I
don't know what it is.
That Romark is up to his tricks yet again by the sound of it, Dave.
Romark
as the shadow of Romark has struck again. Absolutely brilliant. This has been subsection 1.09, paragraph 1 of 1979-80 revisited. Do join us again, paragraph 2, where we'll get a bit of football under the microscope as well. All that leaves me to do is say, please spread the word, subscribe for more content. Do join us again next time. This has been another module via the by the teachings of your boys took hell of a beating. Thank you and goodbye.